first picked up The Artist's Way in 2020 and almost immediately put it back down. And I have picked it up many times since then, but as many of you know, I am working through it finally, and we are currently on week 5. If you're new, hi, I'm Alexis. I am a full-time artist here in New York City. I have a home studio in my Brooklyn apartment, and on this channel, typically I share a view into my art and my inspiration and my activism and life here in the city. And in this series, I am documenting my experience with The Artist's Way, sharing my very honest thoughts and reflections week by week. And if you have not yet seen weeks 1 through 4, I encourage you to check those out and to learn a little bit more about who I am and this process. In week 5, Julia Cameron talks about recovering a sense of possibility. When I first saw that this was the title for this week's reading, I was thrilled because I am absolutely in a phase of my life where I am trying to dream big and really think about what's possible as I rebuild from a monstrous case of burnout. But as I dove into the reading for week 5, Julia Cameron starts with this whole section on limiting beliefs, and that left me feeling pretty heavy, and it gave me a lot to kind of ponder over the next several days. And it was definitely a chapter that I had to go back to and reread, because I have done a lot of thinking and a lot of work around this idea of limiting beliefs, not just over the past 2 years, but really over maybe the last 5, and just because of various things that have happened in my life. And I do wonder how often I count myself out before an outside no will be received, or how often I limit what I envision possible for my life moving forward. And I know I mentioned this in a previous week's video about how often what we dream for ourselves will be much smaller than what could potentially come to be. Because in our dreaming and in our planning, we're working on this framework of what has already come to pass and what our experience up until this point has been. And so we're working within this very limited framework. And it's not until we start to believe that the impossible is possible that it actually can then become something. And so this has definitely been a great challenge and a great unpacking for me within my life. I'm not gonna lie, her whole section on limiting beliefs is really woo-woo. And I struggle with the language and I struggle with the framing. And she consistently reiterates this idea that all we have to do is ask the universe for what we want, and then it will come to pass. And I'm not so sure how I feel about this. I know that in previous weeks, she's talked about how we have to partner with this higher power and trust that this higher power is working and conspiring for our greatest good. And I just don't know if asking for what you want is enough. And I just really struggle with this idea that if we want it, it can be. And perhaps that's my own limiting beliefs. But I think I found my way into this idea when I think back to when I was first transitioning out of my career and into this life of a full-time artist. Many people from a variety of different walks in life with vastly different spiritual practices all told me that what I needed to do was to get very clear about what it is that I wanted. And then once I had that vision, then I could start putting in the action, I guess, to make it happen. And so perhaps it isn't just asking the universe for what you want and then trusting that it will come to pass, but it really is getting clear about what you want and then putting that out into the universe and saying, okay, this is what I hope to build, and this is what I'm willing to do in order to get there. And I would appreciate help. I'm not quite sure. I do really struggle with this idea of manifesting, and I think it left me with a lot to consider. I want to believe that the universe is conspiring with us for our greatest good. And I think that mostly I do believe this. But I also know that I do have some very strong limiting beliefs. And when I am feeling less secure in this path, those doubts start to get really loud. And I start to doubt that what I envision for my life and what I hope to build is possible. And I start to question if it's too late to build something, starting over in this life at 40. But then again, those doubts and those limitations that I put on myself, if someone I cared about expressed those to me, I would not support their line of thinking. So why is it that I accept that limitation for myself? And I do know that when I have had a very clear idea of what it is that I wanted, it worked out. Against the advice of everyone at that time, I only applied to one university because it was the one that I wanted to go to. And I got in. And I decided to move to New York without a safety net. And I'm still here nearly 2 decades later. And so when I was younger, I had no problem just having this like youthful courage and this determination of, this is what I want. This is what I'm gonna go for. Let's make it happen. And now at this point in my life, I wonder if my limiting beliefs are very much tied to the bruising that comes with life experience. And as I continued on with my reading this week, Julia Cameron insisted that if we are bold, the universe will meet that bold decision, right? So the more brave you are, the greater the reward will be. And I took note of this when I read it. And then thinking back to her whole section on synchronicities, within a 24-hour period, this idea was repeated to me twice and then several more times over the course of the week from very unexpected sources. This message of the universe rewards boldness was one that would not leave me alone in week 5. And I definitely took note of that. And in conjunction with this, by taking the action towards that big dream that you have, asking the universe and then acting towards it, the means for that dream will be provided to you. When I reflected on my past experiences where I was extremely bold and jumped into this unknown situation and it was sink or swim, I swam. And the means were provided in truly unexpected ways. And so I do think it ties back to this idea of perhaps releasing the how and knowing your what. And I think what was made really clear to me this week through my reflection and through my kind of untangling of those limiting beliefs, what really holds me back is not even necessarily the what, sometimes the how, but really like my worthiness of it, right? Do I really deserve my dreams? Am I really worthy of building something? And I don't know if I would have gotten to that conclusion if I hadn't kind of trusted the process. And so I think that kind of leads into this next section that she speaks about, which is finding the river. And once again, she really advocates for those morning pages. And she says that through like the stream of consciousness of just writing your thoughts down, you begin to realize how much fluidity exists within us, and our rigidity and our thoughts begins to dissipate, right? So like we become much more open and much more understanding of the complexity of this human experience. And in that understanding of the complexity that is within each of us, she says that then we grow a compassion for ourselves. And within that compassion, we can forgive ourselves for past mistakes and also perhaps give ourselves a little bit more compassion as we step into this creative existence, and really encourage ourselves to go forward when it feels perhaps a little terrifying. And I really like this idea because I truly believe, and I know I've said it before, that we are complex human beings. And I would push it even further and say that as I have done my work through the lens of activism, and as I have done my work through the lens of healing my trauma, the greater compassion I have for myself, the greater compassion I have for others. And so she doesn't even touch on this, but I think it's worth stating that there is this like even greater awareness and this greater softness that comes with that greater knowing of yourself and the complexity that exists within you. And then if you are lucky enough to then translate that and understand how that relates to others, you can begin to see how we are all connected, and you can begin to see the fullness of our existence and the connectivity within this human experience. And it just makes our movement through this world that much more vibrant and that much more lovely. And so I know I still do have some work to do around this compassion for myself, this worthiness of myself, and I am really looking forward to it. I know that it might not always be easy work, but I truly believe that nothing good comes from staying in a comfort zone. Growth only exists when you step outside of what you know and when you push yourself beyond where you're comfortable, and that's how I live my life. So there's this constant uncovering of where I am limiting myself, so that I can learn to navigate through that and come out on the other side much more in tune with who it is that I am. And as I become more in tune with who it is that I am, those outside opinions and those outside voices mean less and less. And so the shame that I perhaps felt around others' opinions about this creative path doesn't mean as much as it used to. And Julia Cameron says that this is the point. This is the point of that, like, finding your flow and losing that rigidity and losing that persona that we've built up and our connection to our ego. The sooner we can release that, the sooner we can step into this creative flow and this creative being and existence and really tap into perhaps what it is that makes us unique, and perhaps what it is that we are supposed to be creating through this fullness of existence. Julia Cameron wraps up week 5 with a discussion of what she calls the virtue trap, and how we as individuals often really want to be perceived as helpful and good. And so we often sacrifice large swaths of who we are, and we put off what it is that we would desire to do to meet the needs of others, and how this virtue trap and this desire to be perceived as good and selfless will often keep us blocked in our creativity, and in turn perhaps also keep us further disconnected from ourselves, right? And so I do know from personal experience that this is something that I really struggled with when I transitioned out of my career. You know, I talk a lot about my first half of my life and my second half of my life. And in my first half of my life, I was a teacher, and I spent my days for many, many years sacrificing my needs for the needs of others. And not just within my job, but in my personal life as well, because self-sacrifice had been so ingrained within who it is that I was. And now, as I have left that behind, and as I have been kind of healing that part of myself and releasing others' expectations, there has been a bit of guilt around this, because that career that I had for so long was the main source of stability for myself and my husband. And we live in New York, and New York ain't cheap. But when I tell you that having a partner who is also a creative has meant more than I can begin to express, because anytime I have expressed that I feel like I am selfish in pursuing this and in trying to build this, because it has meant a great sacrifice for us and our stability, he has assured me that to his core, he believes that I am on the right path, and he tells me to persist, and he assures me that I'm not selfish. I don't know if I would have the courage to pursue this if I didn't have that voice in my ear, or perhaps it would have taken me longer to find the courage if I didn't have that voice. And so I'm truly grateful that as I work through this virtue trap, having kind of been wrapped up in this idea of like selflessness and self-sacrifice as an educator for so long, it has really been something to release that and to learn who I am again, and to think about what it is that I want and what I desire and what I like, and to realize that that doesn't make me selfish. What I'm actually doing is I'm tapping into who it is that I am in this one life that I have in this existence, and I'm actually really excited about that. And I'm really excited to see how that translates into what it is that I will create and how I will move forward in this creative path. But that's not to say about once a month, when my emotions are kind of all over the place, man, those doubts and those fears and that virtue trap, that's when it starts to rear its ugly head. But if you can learn your patterns and if you can name them as they pop up, I think naming them and being able to release them is one of the most significant things you'll be able to do for yourself. And that wraps up week 5. Week 5 really was a doozy. When I finished reading it for the first time, I was pretty emotional, and it kind of depressed me a little bit because I realized just how many limiting beliefs still exist within myself, and I really got down on myself about that. But then, holding on to this idea of growing compassion for yourself, I was able to navigate through that. And once you can release that guilt or, disappointment, I guess, and I can't believe I'm holding myself back in these ways, you can equip yourself to move through it and to come out on the other side a little bit stronger. So I encourage you that if you've gotten to week 5, like I did, and you were like, oh damn, this is a bummer, keep going and show yourself that compassion and allow yourself to sit with it. Week 5 really took me about a week and a half instead of a week, because I had to just keep coming back to it and really thinking about all of the things that I was uncovering about myself through this journey. And also really thinking about that idea of the bold moves. Give yourself however much time you need to process that, but I would say don't give up. And so if it took me 10 days, that's fine. But I'm gonna keep moving with week 6 too, you know what I'm saying? And so in week 5, I continued my artist date of walks around my neighborhood here in Brooklyn with just practicing the art of noticing. I have been really finding that helpful for not just filling up my creative well, but also for my mental health. And so I know that there are 1,000 museums in New York, and I love going to them, but for me right now, I need what is accessible and what is easy. And I don't think that there's any harm in that. I think it's finding ways to make this work with where you are in your life. And so I have just been really loving walking around Brooklyn, getting into the parks, and noticing just all the beautiful things that exist in the city. And I continued with my morning pages, and I'll be honest, week 5 is where they started to really feel like a chore. I did not want to do them. I didn't want to do them, and I think that that's okay. I would open up my journal and I would just be really annoyed that it was another thing that I had to do. And I don't know if it's because I was already kind of in my feelings about the reading, but they were definitely a challenge to complete this week. But I did them. And even though I was really reluctant and hesitant to do them, I can see the benefit of them, because through that practice I did experience a few breakthroughs, and I received some clarification about how I'm holding myself back and what my limiting beliefs are, and I was able to just kind of speak some power to myself in those moments and envision the path forward through those uncomfortable feelings that will best help enable me to reach that dream life. And I know I've already talked a little bit about synchronicities with that idea that just kept bombarding me this week, with that idea of the universe rewards bold moves. And when that kept coming up, that was really a challenge for me to think about where it is that I want to be bold. And while I'm not yet ready to be bold, I do know what it is that I want. And so what I am doing is I am putting that into the universe of, okay, this is what I want, and this is the vision that I have, and I want to get to this place. And so now I am doing what I need to do to build my career and my art business so that I can take that next step. And I will take it when it feels uncomfortable, trusting that it will allow things to unfold. But like I said, I left my career, and so that stability and those finances are a little tight right now. I trust that I will be able to take this step but I also know that it might take me a minute before I can get there. And I'm okay with that because it took me a year of planning that bold move before I came to New York, and it worked out way more beautifully than I could have ever imagined. And if I had just been like, fuck it, I'm quitting my job and I'm moving today and I'm not honoring my contract, they can find another teacher in August, you know, like all of these things, like it would have been a lot messier. And so I do think that even within being bold, there's something to being thoughtful about it. And so right now, at this point, I am being thoughtfully bold. And all of her tasks this week, of course, centered around this idea of limiting beliefs. And they hit hard and they were really interesting, and it uncovered a lot for me personally. And I definitely think that this is going to be something that I come back to and I revisit and I do again periodically, just because I think it's a good practice to understand where it is that you're holding yourself back so that you can find the courage to kind of speak some sense to yourself and go for what it is that you want. Speak to yourself like you would speak to someone you care about, right? And so that has been my work this week. And I look forward to doing it again as needed, just so that I can kind of check in with myself and keep moving forward. But that's it. That's week 5. And holy cow, it took me a minute to get here. But I'm glad I did, and I am glad that you're here. And if you made it through this video, I just want to thank you for spending your time with me, because we all know that time is valuable. So thank you. If you found value in this video in any way, I would really appreciate if you gave this video a thumbs up. That helps YouTube know to send this video out to others who might also find value here. And if you would like to follow along as I complete The Artist's Way, but also as I rebuild my life here as a full-time artist in New York City after tremendous burnout, I would be truly honored if you subscribed. We have a very small but growing community here, and I am just thrilled. I'm so thrilled and I'm so excited, and I am just so grateful that each and every one of you are here. And I cannot wait until we have conversations in the comments, because I would love to get to know you better. But yeah, if you want to subscribe, I would love to have you as a part of our little community here. But I am gonna just leave y'all at that. So whatever time of day you've watched this, I hope it's been a kind one. Until next time.